Good morning. I'm Barbie Laderman-Jones, and I'm going to read a poem entitled Desiderata. The title is Latin for Things Desired, and this poem was written in 1927 by American writer and business person Max Ehrman. Desiderata. Go placidly amid the noise and haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even the dull and ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain and bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself, especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune. But do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be, and whatever your labors and aspirations, in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful. Strive to be happy. I chose this poem for this service because it includes both beauty and wisdom. The author's intent was clearly to impart wisdom by giving advice on how to live a happy life and keep peace in one's soul. I find it a beautiful poem, and the final lines of the poem are a reminder of the beauty of the world. But my favorite lines of the poem are those that connect beauty and wisdom for me. Those lines are, beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. I believe that the author chose to mention trees and stars because they are beautiful. And the comparison with me as the reader tells me that I am also beautiful, simply by virtue of being a human being, and that my existence is important. And I find that wisdom very reassuring.
Good morning. I'm Bonnie Miller. I'm pretty new to this congregation, and I'm really happy to be here after all those months on Zoom. It's nice to meet people in person and get to know you. So I thought of my dad when accepting this invitation to share my thoughts, and Father's Day is coming up pretty soon, if you need a way to connect it. So first of all, you know how there can never be enough photos of sky, ocean, sunset, mountain, flowers, or fill in the blanks. I relearned to appreciate the random moments of everyday beauty when my physical world shrunk during pandemic lockdown. Not only the grand sky, sunset, Montera mountain views outside my windows or ocean views from the Pacifica beach walks, but sunlight and shadow at the window's edge, or an oblique angle of some of my favorite little things or mundane items around the house. Digitally captured and stored, maybe to paint or collage sometime. Hasn't happened yet. This is also known as hidden treasures, right? All of our digital images. This was a bit of wisdom I relearned, to look at the everyday small things as well and appreciate them. So secondly, about my dear departed parents, they were children of immigrants, moms, Armenian Holocaust, World War I refugees, and dads, Western European, who came through Ellis Island and landed in Michigan. They were children in the Depression, the eldest helping to support their families and during and after high school. When they were engaged and Mom lost her job, he suggested they get married right away so he could move in and support her family. Later, they raised 4 of us, including my older brother, who is blind and on the autism spectrum, with little money. They were practical and pragmatic. We never went hungry and always felt safe and loved. I know they set aside their own dreams and aspirations to do this. So about my dad. He worked all the time to support our family, extra shifts, overnights. He was an electrician for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. He fixed everything around the house, the car, and for the neighbors. He was smart, adventurous, inventive, and a visionary ahead of his time. This despite graduating from high school with D's, because helping his dad, who had to work another job, run the farm and support the family meant no time to study. Now for 2 memories that illustrate how my dad's wisdom framed his definition of beauty. One is, well, I launched out into the world right after high school, and over the years would see pictures from home of a few red plastic roses in a snowbank in the corner of the front yard. Dad put them there as a reminder that winter would eventually turn into spring and flowers would again bloom in the garden. And then, by the way, years later, Mom, Dad, and my brother had their own rooms on the same assisted living floor of a small retirement home. One year during a visit, I organized the 4 of us kids to secretly stick a few plastic flowers in the grass outside his window to surprise him the next morning. The other memory is when Dad had cataract surgery, he told Mom she was even more beautiful than ever. So this is Dad's love and wisdom shining through his vision of beauty. Okay.
Nice dad. My name is Lee Rossi. Most of you know that I'm a poet, but poetry was not my first experience of beauty, so let me tell you a little bit about that. Recently, a wise man, I think Chris DeCardy was his name, asked me what the relationship between beauty and wisdom is. I don't think about those kinds of things very often, but he helped me clarify some ideas I might have. Another way of thinking about the question is, what is it that beauty helps us see or hear? First of all, it helps us see and hear ourselves. My family didn't have a lot of books in our house, and we never went to the museum. But we lived at the edge of the great eastern forest. All those trees, there were even elms in those days, growing and changing with the seasons. And then in spring there was dogwood and forsythia, signaling the arrival of warmer weather and the chance to escape the confinement of the house. So many different flowering plants and birds. This was St. Louis, of course, and we had cardinals in our front yard. The dour females and the flamboyant crested red males. Sometimes we'd go to the zoo. We had a really good zoo. You remember Marlon Perkins? He was director there when I was a child. We had monkey and elephant shows. We had big cats. But I loved the ungulates, the camels and elands, kudus and gazelles, even the buffalo. Graceful, remote, radiating a serenity I could only imagine. Experiences like that enabled me to feel who I was. At home and at school, I was constantly being told who I was, who I should be, a child of God, a citizen of the greatest country on earth. But those lessons didn't take, like my time in our yard or at the zoo did. But just as important as the experience of beauty was the experience of unbeauty or ugliness. I remember driving south to Memphis, my father's home. Every summer, we'd spend a couple of weeks with my dad's family. The latter part of the drive took us through the Missouri boot heel, cotton country, long miles of nothing but the white tufted plants, and occasionally a row of 3 or 4 tiny houses, shacks where sharecroppers, black families usually, lived. It was hot in the boot heel. This was July, August. There were no trees to shade and shelter those tiny houses. Once in a while, I'd see an old woman sitting on a porch, radiating what I understood as despair. I could tell she didn't want to be there, but that she had no choice. Whatever kept her there and sent me hurrying along to the air-conditioned comfort of my uncle's house in Memphis was an unspoken mystery that life was asking me to understand. We behold the ugliness of that mystery every time people are murdered in the name of God or country or someone's desperate need to subjugate others. So what is it that beauty or its lack helps us see? It helps us see ourselves in the relation to the world, the human world, as well as the natural world. It gives us focus and direction. It shows us what is valuable and where the meaning of our lives will be found.
Good morning. My name is Joyce Porter. My pronouns are she, her. Petronius said beauty and wisdom form a very rare combination. I say he wasn't looking closely. They're often linked and hiding in plain sight. For many, nature is a primary source of beauty. On my first hike in California, I marveled at the abundance of trees growing in drought conditions. In fact, trees move water from their roots to their leaves, allowing them to survive and thrive. That suggests that trees have inherent wisdom, naturally making internal adjustments that we enjoy externally as beauty. A beautiful mural presentation appeals to our senses of taste, sight, and smell. Your dinner guests may exclaim, "Oh, that looks good." Some post pictures of their meals on Facebook so that we can all enjoy the beauty. But where would we be without the wisdom of the partners in the supply chain, the seed itself, the farmers, the distribution and commercial pipelines, or the hands that prepared that meal? The luxury car, the sleek boat, the palatial mansion are often described as beautiful. The integrity of these structures is built on the wisdom of the laborers involved. In that sense, wisdom creates beauty. The landscaping, the paint job, and that final trim are usually the last steps in the process. Without wisdom, beauty is just a shell. This month, Soul Matters asks us, what makes a beautiful soul? For me, it's those wise individuals who've experienced extreme suffering and found their way out of the darkness with renewed sensitivity and appreciation for the fragility of life. Those who seek and radiate joy and have chosen to move beyond bitterness, resentment, and anger. Think Nelson Mandela. Think Gabby Giffords. Think Viktor Frankl. And if you really want to have a good time, Google John Lewis dancing to the happy song. I open with a reference to Petronius, who found the combination of beauty and wisdom rare. To the contrary, they dance together, all around us. Are you looking?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Amy French. UU Principle 6 is the goal of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And I'd like to add beauty, wisdom, and music, because everyone has access to music and can make it. Beautiful songs lift us up and motivate us to be our best selves. As we grow older and wiser, some songs make us cry and tap into our wisdom and into our outrage. Beautiful, poignant songs can sometimes help us as we mourn. In Bring Him Home, from Les Mis, Jean Valjean sings, "Bring him peace, bring him joy. He is young, he is only a boy." And then he sings, "If I die, let me die, let him live." It's a plea. A sacrifice is needed. God, please let them live. Please bring them home. It is wise, and it pulls at our heartstrings. It is so beautiful. Our choir recently sang "You Raise Me Up." It's by Secret Garden. Josh Groban sings it with lush violins and a full chorus and huge amphitheaters. The soaring melody climbs up and up. And for Groban, a Christian, God raises him up when he is down. For others, it's a wedding song. For me, I have thoughts of parents raising their children up so they can stand on mountains. It's a song of wisdom that comes with being still and silent. Then I am still and wait here in the silence. It suggests we reflect and be grateful for loved ones who give us a boost. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. In The Sound of Music's Climb Every Mountain, another mountain song, it's a powerful song with good advice. And we hear, "A dream that will need all the love you can give every day of your life for as long as you live." It tells us there's a brighter day on the other side. Follow every rainbow till you find your dream. I believe the tears let us see the rainbows clearly. Without tears, are there rainbows? As we sign Sandy Hook promises and petitions, we know God is not intervening in this nightmare. We hope leaders and laws will change, although we know 50% of Americans are gun owners, and the NRA keeps Congress apprised of this. And so our leaders want to keep their positions, and on we go. Our dream is to let children live so they can be raised to find their dreams. Beautiful music is our balm to help our community be wise and strong.
How awesome is that? To hear from just 5 of us their stories. And it is such a reminder that every one of us has a story. I will fully admit I have thought about plastic flowers in the snow in a particular judgmental way in my life. And Bonnie, my pledge is to never do that again, because it is an insight into and from your story. So to each of you, thank you. Thank you for your vulnerability and your openness. And I think each of you has done a wonderful job distinguishing what we talked about at the beginning from the superficiality of glamour to that inwardness of beauty. And still, even if we are capable of doing that, and that is a tall order, I think beauty is still really, really hard. It is elusive. I think beauty is a really tough concept, at least partly because the word beauty is so rigidly ingrained and typecast in our society. And even if you work hard to avoid it, its narrow, heterosexualized application to feminine physical perfection is just everywhere. It's in the air we breathe. You can't avoid it. Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships, over and over and over again in various permutations. So to the 5 of you, thank you, because what you have said provides such an important counterbalance in our time together. And it's there that I want to start from. So let me start with a story. When our boys were younger, age 7 and 12, we had a once-in-a-lifetime chance to take a trip to Europe. And one morning we were in Paris and we went to the Orangerie. And the Orangerie is pretty much just one single big oval art gallery, and it's got this bench in the middle of it with these amazing Monet water lilies all around. The light is fabulous as it comes in from the top and the sides. So I have 2 pictures that I treasure from that entire 6 weeks in Europe, and both of them are from this gallery. So the first one is of our younger son, Riley, and he is pulling, kind of literally dragging his mother up close to one of those water lilies, pointing the way. You could just see the enthusiasm and wonder in his eyes, this 7-year-old's eyes. The second picture was likely taken either moments before or just after the first one. And it's of our older son, Owen. And he is slumped on that bench in the middle. And he's got his head in the crook of his arm, and his eyes are downclasped or maybe even closed. And never has the personification of sheer boredom been so present in a body or a being. So beauty, my friends, is clearly in the eyes of those 2 beholders, and they had come to the exact opposite conclusion. And that moment actually brought me back to my first real interaction with Monet. And it was 30 years before that, and it was the first chance I ever had to go to Europe. I was a college student in London, and I thought maybe it'd be a good idea to take art history class because, in London there was all this art. So why not? So in this class, we were in one of London's museums. I think it was probably the National Gallery, and we're standing in the Impressionist Gallery. And we had some kind of instruction to go and look at all of these paintings and then come back into the center of the room to share our reflections. And so we got back, and several students pointed to an early Monet and said that it had really moved them. And that started our instructor talking about how unbelievably revolutionary his paintings were at that time, even though today they can seem a little cliched. So I offered up that I found a work in the room by Camille Pissarro, who was a contemporary of Monet's and also considered quite influential, that I found that work to be really compelling. And she immediately shoots back at me and she says, well, what year is it from? I'm like, I don't know, I went over and looked. Okay, 1897. And she's like, well, that's 2 decades too late. It's derivative by that point. I'm like, derivative? And so I know it was an art history class, but I had been captivated by the beauty of this painting. It was the Montmartre at night in the rain. And what I had done, subliminally or not, is I had let the judgment of this art instructor shut down my relationship with the wonder of that painting for me in that moment. Look, if it's beautiful, not glamorous, but beautiful to you, it is, and if it isn't, it isn't. Full stop. And external critics, not to mention our own internal critic, can really mess that up. So as much as I love Riley's reaction to the Monet in the moment in that room, I actually am more impressed with Owen's, because I would not have had the courage in that room in front of all those art aficionados to lay down on a bench and will myself to be somewhere else. So I'm going to continue on with beauty in a moment, but first I'm going to detour to the other side and to wisdom. So Reinhold Niebuhr was a 20th century American theologian, and you likely know him at least because he is the one that authored what has come to be known as the Serenity Prayer. Now, I kind of like this. It's simple and it works for me. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I like it. It helps me think about wisdom. Except, evidently, this is not how Niebuhr first wrote this prayer. His original is this: Father, give us courage to change what must be altered, serenity to accept what cannot be helped, and the insight to know the one from the other. So I've actually now come to love this original version even more, and it's for 2 reasons. And the first one's a bit of an aside, but in the first one that he wrote, the courage part comes first, which I kind of like. And even more importantly, he says it's the courage to change what must be altered. It shifts it from some acknowledgement of what I can or cannot have agency to change, but to what in the world must be changed. So think about this for a second, because if the measure is what I can change, well, frankly, in my adult lifetime, I have decades of experience of not believing I can change anything related to the pandemic of gun violence in our country. So if the measure is what I can change, perhaps acceptance is the right path. But if the measure is what must be changed, well, that suggests action regardless if I believe I will be successful. So how UU is that? A lot of folks who do something amazing in this world would never have begun if they knew the odds of success at the beginning. But begin they did because they believed they must. So the second reason I love this original version of Niebuhr's prayer, and this one's more related to the topic of today, is that he looks for the insight to know the difference between the two rather than the wisdom. And this is helpful to me, and it's probably because I really have a personal struggle with wisdom, Lee's lovely sentiment notwithstanding. I constantly question, I struggle, I always find myself doubling back on what I thought I once knew with some certainty. Wisdom for me just seems like some accumulated, settled, grand perspective of a truly complex issue, and that feels way beyond what I can make sense of. But insight, I can kind of handle that. It feels less grandiose, like reaching a sense of momentary clarity and saying, yeah, that sits right for me right now. So insight, I think, for me, again, comes from a new way of seeing or understanding or feeling. And that's exactly what beauty does for us. Its capacity, even for a moment, to totally absorb us in the present. its ability to generate awe and wonder, reminding us that the world is so gloriously incomprehensible. It's bigger than each one of us. Beauty has the potential to shake us out of locked pathways, creating understanding, being open to something that only moments before seemed completely unsensed or unseen. For all of these reasons, beauty is a direct pathway to wonder, wonder to insight, and I suppose maybe accumulated insight is what wisdom is. So on our topic for today, I'm actually going to state the conclusion as a premise. Yes, beauty, or more precisely, moments of my harmonic connection with beauty, can be a powerful pathway to insight. Okay, but note my hedge. Can be a pathway, but not necessarily. And I think that's because there are very real barriers to us being open to the potential of that beauty, beyond the barrier of glamour. Even if we escape that trap, I think there are still traps waiting for us that make it hard to make the connection. And so my first art experience in Europe is one of those. The judgment of others, or even more importantly from myself, as to whether something has the right to be seen as beautiful. It's hard to take courage to own completely that it's your eye, your soul, your moment of openness and a harmonious connection. And if you get to that place through how the white, creamy filling is so wonderfully nestled deeply at the heart of that Twinkie, well, that's how you got there, and no judgment. All right, so maybe a beauty of a Twinkie is a bit too far, but how about socks? Here is 20th century poet Pablo Neruda, Ode to My Socks. Maro Mori brought me a pair of socks, which she knitted herself with her shepherdess hands, 2 socks as soft as rabbits. I slipped my feet into them as though into 2 cases knitted with threads of twilight and goatskin. Violent socks. My feet were 2 fish made of wool, 2 long sharks, sea blue, shot through by 1 golden thread. 2 immense blackbirds, 2 cannons. My feet were honored in this way by these heavenly socks. They were so handsome for the first time my feet seemed to be unacceptable, like 2 decrepit firemen unworthy of that woven fire of those glowing socks. Nevertheless, I resisted the sharp temptation to save them somewhere, as schoolboys keep fireflies, as learned men collect sacred texts. I resisted the mad impulse to put them into a golden cage and each day give them birdseed and pieces of pink melon. Like explorers in the jungle who hand over the very rare green deer to the spit and eat it with remorse, I stretched out my feet, pulled on the magnificent socks, and then my shoes. The moral of my ode is this: beauty is twice beauty, and what is good is doubly good when it is a matter of 2 socks made of wool in winter. All right, it's a spring day, but come on, your toes in those socks, feeling them right now, huh? That's just amazing. And what I love most about this poem is that he has the urge to capture the beauty of these things and put them on a shelf, to lock them in a cage in an effort, and we have done this, right, to revisit that feeling at that moment that he's had upon receiving this gift. But he doesn't. He uses them. And I think there's a great wisdom in that simple act, because as much as we'd love to, we simply cannot freeze beauty. Or rather, that moment of a beautiful wonder that comes, you can't revisit that exactly the same way in some future time. So he's avoided another trap, and it's one that I fall into constantly. I've had a moment of deep connection with beauty, and I want to keep it boxed up so I can have it again. Except you never can. So beauty is hard because of judgment, and beauty is hard because of impermanence. It's also hard because we so want sometimes to force it. So I love, and he's no longer with us, the actor and storyteller Spalding Gray. Some of you may know him. He's featured in several movies, spinning these marvelous winding monologues. Swimming to Cambodia is one of them, and it is his reflections on time he spent in Thailand during the filming of Apocalypse Now, where he had a limited role. And that filming evidently turned out to be messy, complicated to say the least. So in this monologue, he mentions at one point that he never liked to leave a place he was visiting until he had what he termed a perfect moment. And his definition is much like what we've been talking about today, being completely absorbed in time and in peaceful harmony with himself and with what was around him. So as his story unfolds, he keeps explaining how during the course of this shoot, he would have potential perfect moments, but they'd be messed up in various ways by his expectation or by competition or something else that would get in his head. So it actually gets to the point where the film shoot is over, everyone's left, but he's told his partner at the time that they have to stay so he can have his perfect moment. So some days pass, she's getting increasingly exasperated. And so there's one morning when she's had enough. She tracks him down, sitting quietly in some lush setting, and unloads on him about being self-centered and how she's fed up and she needs to leave right away. And to which he responds, and I think he says out loud, maybe it's to himself, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. He responds, well, I was actually well on the verge of the perfect moment until you showed up. So when I first saw this movie, I loved the whole concept of the perfect moment. It put a name to something that I had experienced, but I had never quite been able to wrap my head around, and it makes sense to me. But the trap, of course, is the one Spalding Gray set for himself at the very beginning, that he had to have a perfect moment before he could go home. You can be open to receiving beauty. You can be open to having the perfect moment, but you can't force it. Maybe it comes, maybe it doesn't. And furthermore, the more you try to make it happen, well, the less likely it is to come, no matter how long you make yourself and someone else stay in Thailand. All right, so where do we stand? Beauty can open us up to wisdom, not necessarily. You can't force it or freeze it. You can't let the judgment of others or history or your inner critic get in the way. We don't even have the right words for it. And even if we avoid glamour and the superficial, there are traps to accessing beauty everywhere. And this gets me to my last point. So there's this great song on the whole topic. It's called All This Useless Beauty. It is written by that amazing post-punk English Generation X singer-philosopher. Of course, I'm talking about Elvis Costello. He said it came to him one day while he was sitting in a gallery in Florence, and he found himself looking more at the people looking at these ancient sculptures than looking at the sculptures themselves. And he was struck with sadness that contemporary society spends so much time focused on saying they had seen important works of art than actually seeing important works of art. You know, yep, there it is. I took a look at it, straight to the gift shop for the postcard to send home. What shall we do? What shall we do with all this useless beauty? All this useless beauty. So, yeah, wasted beauty around us all the time. So as Joyce so wonderfully pointed out. So Mary Oliver said essentially the same thing in this simple poem about the sun. Have you ever seen anything in your life more wonderful than the way the sun, every evening, relaxed and easy, floats toward the horizon? Or have you too gone crazy for power, for things? And that's true, and I completely believe it. But I do also find myself saying both to Elvis and Mary at this moment, I get it. I have gone crazy for power and things. But I'll refer back to Barbie's opening here. Not always, not all the time. Maybe be a little gentle with myself on this. I'm pretty sure that feeling guilty about missing beauty is not my pathway to being open to beauty. So to go back to the beginning, the very origins of the word beauty in the English language puts us in the realm of ascribing objective standards of quality or bestness. We're in trouble before we even begin. Maybe we need another language, and I'm about to speak way out of my league here. But it is my understanding that the Navajo tradition is grounded on the concept of hoso. And hoso, in one aspect, is the interconnectedness between beauty and harmony. And now we might be able to get somewhere. Because I think true, tender relationship in a moment of time does lead to harmony. And that is what creates the openness to receive beauty. So perhaps beauty isn't so much of a thing as it is the relationship between me and you and us and that thing. The relationship between me or you or us and that thing. And isn't that the space where beauty creates wonder and wonder creates possibility?